So we're going to kick off with a company that we're all familiar with. We've got Zoe Williams here from King, who's going to talk to us about going from live ops to live ops, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what she has to say about that. So I think we're hopefully Zoe will be joining us on the screen shortly. Yep. Hey Zoe, how are you doing? So I'm really looking forward to this. Zoe, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself. Over to you.
Great, thank you. So morning everyone, let me just share my screen for you. So hi again, I'm Zoe. I'm in business performance at King. So my home is within the Farm Hero Saga game studio. I also do some work for Candy Crush Friends and ads, but as today's about live ops, I'll focus on my experience within Farm, where I spearhead the live ops team alongside a colleague from CRM, production and game design. But before we go there, just a super quick view on King as a company. So we've developed more than 200 games, which are enjoyed by players worldwide. We actually had 273 million monthly active users in Q1. So King's been part of Activision Blizzard since 2016, but as a company, we were founded in 2003, and we have our major game studios in Stockholm, London, Barcelona, Malmo, and Berlin. So I mentioned that we have 200 games that our players play, but there's 4 super recognizable global franchises. So just quickly on those, we have the Candy Crush Saga. So that's where Candy Friend sits, Candy Soda, just to name a few. We have Pet Rescue Saga, and we have Bubble Witch Saga. And of course, we have Farm Hero Saga, which is where I sit, and that's in the London studio. Candy Crush Friends is also in the London studio. But going back to my talk title, so from lowercase live ops to uppercase live ops, that's kind of what we're going to delve into today. So we'll look at what a live op is across the industry. We'll look at what I mean by the lowercase live op and the drive that we've taken to go from lowercase to uppercase. So best place to start, I figure, was probably at the beginning. So what is a live op? What does the industry, the games industry, view as a live op? So I've read various articles. I've spoken to other people in the industry. I even Googled it, but doesn't seem to be a set, like a standard 3 or 4 items that define a live op. I think it's different per game. People view it differently. So you just take direction from the generally agreed opinions. So instead of defining a live op industry-wide, I've just picked my favorite descriptions. So this is actually an article for Pocket Gamer. And it was that live ops is about introducing features as chocolates in a box. So each are a small new delight that keeps you coming back for more. And I really love that one. I think that encapsulates really what we're trying to achieve with our live ops. They keep the game fresh, increasing the life of the old content by just giving a little bit new. But also from another point, on a more tech-specific side, it's about making changes to the game that don't interrupt the player experience. So we can put our live ops in without the players having to stop and re-download, etc. So it's all about being agile and bringing new content forward. So in terms of Farm Hero Saga specifically, our live ops are all time limited. They all use new content in addition to our standard gameplay, and they use over-the-air content updates. So again, that's making the changes without interrupting the gameplay. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Farm, as well as saying you should go give it a go, I thought I'd just give you a quick view of what the main gameplay looks like. So it's a match 3 or more puzzle game. So you can see at the top here that this player has 12 moves left. So they have 12 moves left to collect all the targets up here. So in this case, the player needs to collect 5 more apples to complete the level within 12 moves. You collect targets by matching 3 or more. So if you look down here, we see players collected 5 waters, and we call them cropsies. So 5 water cropsies, so that would be 5 going up to his target on top. Now, this gets more complicated as you go through the game. We introduce things that we call blockers that I won't go into now, but they just make gameplay a bit more difficult. They add a new element, they're a new thing to collect. So in terms of what our players see when they play live ops, they still have this core gameplay. So we have our saga, which is the main progression. So players are going from level 1 to level 3,600, wherever we're at the moment. We're continually releasing new levels for the players. And there they exist on a live system. So you have 5 lives, and if you lose them all, you have to wait a certain amount of time to recharge. What we've also done, though, on the side is built an energy system. So when players are playing our live ops, which I'll give an example of in a moment, they use little balls of energy. So they have 5 that they can use there. And this just means that by playing a live op, the player isn't losing an opportunity to continue to progress in their saga. We found our players particularly enjoy this. The behaviors we see are that players tend to burn out their lives on the saga progression and then move over to the live op. And of course, also some players just enjoy the live op, and other players are stuck on the saga, so live op's a nice escape. So getting into more of my title, the lower case live op, I've grabbed a few examples for you. So if you see here, this is how we display a live op to the player. So this is what they see. In this case, there's 9 levels, and they need to play all 9 levels. They get rewards as every 3 levels to get to the big reward at the end to essentially win the live op. So here they click on the flowers to access each level. So we call this one flower. We have another one. It's got chickens and eggs. We call it chicken. So if you see here, I've called these reoccurring live ops. These players are shown these throughout the year multiple times. I'll go into them in a bit more detail later on, but for now, those are our lowercase reoccurring. Now, in a small step towards the uppercase, so I guess we could call this a capital L live op, perhaps, we have our unique live ops. So there are 2 types of these. Some of them are directly linked to farm itself. So we had our 6th birthday. So we built a live op just for the 6th birthday. The players will just see it once, and it's heavily themed. So in this case here, it's the frosting that are the level stations. That's how players play the levels. So another example here was level 3000. Players, again, that's linking to farm. So in terms of our other unique live ops that we do, these are more linked to events that players are experiencing in their everyday lives. So for example, here, winter, we're going up to the holiday season. So we gave them a live op that was themed towards that. Another example could be New Year's Eve. So we may give them one that's more about celebrations and fireworks, for example. So that's kind of our lowercase live op view. So they're all visually different. They are giving players a new way to play through content, but there isn't any new mechanics. So how do we transform from these lowercase to the uppercase? The best way to describe this is with a chart, which obviously is about right for me, given that I'm in business performance. So our previous schedule, we aim to run live ops every week of the year. So bearing this in mind, on our previous schedule, our previous live op calendar, we were looking at 60% unique live ops. So that was really taking advantage of things happening in the world that players can relate to, which makes the game more relatable, but also taking advantage of things within farms so that players felt close to our game. 40% are that reoccurring live ops. That's like the chicken and the flower. Now that seems pretty high, but there's a couple of reasons for this. For one, this is where we do all of our, well, a lot of our testing. It's a great place to ensure that we're still hitting the mark of what the players want. So we can ensure that players are still being driven by the reward system we're using, that the players still enjoy the sort of blockers that we're using within the live ops. So this is a great chance just to learn and understand. And also, it's not possible always to have brand new, unique content coming out all the time. So this gives us the breathers and the gaps between while we have our new content drawn up. And then moving to the current schedule. So that's on the right here. And you see that this event, this uppercase live op, has now been added. So we've taken mainly from the unique live ops to create this event live op. So the reason for this is we want to keep our reoccurring live ops, that testing ability that we have, and the filling the gaps, the players still have content and we don't have to design new items for it. That's still really important. So 30% is still the reoccurring live op. Although we are working on brand new skins, so that's the visual you see. So we're working on brand new skins to go into our rotating schedule of reoccurring live ops, just so it is a little bit more varied for the players. But the biggest question is around the 20% unique. Now, unique is a step towards the uppercase live op, as I mentioned. So it made sense to take from the unique and put it in the uppercase live op section. The reason we still have 20% unique, again, comes down to what are we able to do with production? What support do we really have? So, and also it works well for events like, for example, Halloween. So I mentioned Bubble Witch Saga. That's one of the other King franchises, and it has a witch. So that's actually more suited to Halloween. but it's also an event that our players live through. So it makes sense in that case to give them a unique live op. So it's going to look like Halloween, it's great, but it's not our area. It doesn't link to the farm specifically. So rather than invest that dev time in an event around it, instead we provide them with the unique content. So that's kind of where the unique ones are coming up in our current schedule. So in terms of making this move, what changed? Was there a change in our thought process? Was there a change in our priorities for us to kind of move from lowercase to this uppercase live op? Well, it was actually a structure in the studio, a structure change in the studio, which enabled us. So we now have an events track. So the studio is split into 3 tracks, 3 views, and one of them is events. And the goal of our track is to keep the content exciting for players by keep providing them with a full and a fresh live ops calendar, always meeting player needs and introducing new gameplay mechanic where possible. So why is this suddenly possible? Why does making a track make a difference? Well, it's meant that we've got a dedicated development pod. So this means that we have clear visibility on how much time developers have, and it enables us to plan more efficiently. So we could look and say, right, well, we have a few options, one's small, one's medium, one's large, and kind of in a Tetris way, fit them into the development calendar, which means that we can get a lot more out. Previously, we did have the development support, but as their priorities weren't directly linked to the events, to the live op track, it was harder to slot in what we required. In addition to that, we also have an events central team now. So again, events, uppercase, live op, central team now. And that team actually has time to dedicate to the live ops, which again, just ensures that we're really focusing on the right things and really, really driving forward. So on that, this events team, we have a member from CRM. And the big benefit here, this point is around the marketing and player insights. So they have great relationships with those teams. They can ensure that when we're doing our uppercase live ops, they're in the best position to ensure that we're getting the marketing support, that we're really working with the guys in the community to really reach out to the players. And another great thing about the CRM side is they have access to tools, which mean we can put things in the game without using developers. So this is great for the small things, for proof of concepts. So for example, previously we tried out challenging players to play 20 levels in a row and within 24 hours. And if they managed that, they got a high value reward. We wanted to understand whether that sort of thing drove our players. And we were able to do that with CRM tools. And then we could take those learnings there and decide if it's something we want to build into the game more permanently in the future. We have a business performance representative, so that's myself. That we're all about testing, learning, and optimizing. So as well as looking at the new and making data-driven decisions on where to go next for live ops, we also look at what we currently have. Is it still meeting player needs? Are players still interested in this? Can we make it better? So it's just continually surveying the whole product calendar from lowercase to uppercase. We have our game UX designer. So the focus here is on the player journey and the player wants, as well as obviously designing content. They're there to ensure that when I have my data and have my language from data, that we're still thinking in the eyes of the player. We're still putting ourselves in the player's shoes. And then finally, production. So this is all about the process. They're the umbrella function. They bring all of this together, including the dev team, and they're there to help ensure that everything runs smoothly, everything runs together as it should. And we have this really well-oiled, I guess, uppercase live op machine. So as a team, it's our responsibility we run ideations and create briefs for new things to go into the game. We base it all on data, of course. We then kick off with new specs with design, so start that process, and then we put it into the year live op calendar. So we're running the calendar as well. And then when it comes to the events going live, we're the ones doing the setup and we're doing the monitoring. So we're really responsible and accountable for the whole process. So at this point, I'm pretty sure I know the question on everyone's minds. Can we have an example? Well, sure. So this is an example here. It's called Amelia's Adventure. We ran it earlier in the year. So Amelia is one of the main characters on Farm. She's a little pig up top. And for this uppercase live op, we had the new art and the new level sets as we would for our unique live ops. But the new mechanic in it was this new narrative layer. So this was focused on adjusting how the players interact with live ops. So previously they play maybe because they like to get to the end. So in this case, it's 18 levels. So they just play to get to the end, rewards throughout. But we wanted to understand if our players would engage with and enjoy going on a journey with our characters as they played through the live op. So in this case, when you went into the live op screen for Amelia's adventure, there was a story panel that came up. And it was, Amelia's plane's broken, it needs fixing, help her fix it. So as you play through the live op, you're getting more bits of the story telling you how you're working with Amelia, helping her fix her plane and eventually get it up into the sky. So this was kind of the uppercase element, but brought it forward. This was the new mechanic we chose to focus on for this uppercase live op. And it was a full event, which we're trying really hard to do with our uppercase live op events. So we had full marketing support as well as featuring on Apple and Google. We involved player support in the community. So we, in the forums, we built up some hype around Amelia. We had conversations going on in there. We even ran a Q&A session with our head of farming community. So it was the interview was pre-done and shared with the players, and that was all taken very well by the players. And again, all of it is linked to this kind of strong Amelia and her adventure. So I realized I've given a lot of information. So just to recap on kind of the live ops within Farm, and we are reoccurring live ops. So those are ones that are around businesses, our business as usual. So that they fill the gaps, but they're also a great opportunity for us to test and to learn and understand what's driving our players. We have our unique live ops, which players only see once, and they tend to be linked to either events going on in Farm as a game or events going on in the world, so players can kind of connect to them a little bit more. So 6th birthday was an example, but another example I gave was a winter. But also we just ran a spring event, so it could just be down to the seasons. And then finally, we have these uppercase live ops, these events. So here's Amelia's adventure, and here's just an example of those kind of story panels that players were seeing as they played through. So the next steps, I mean, where does one go after full capitalization? You know, once you've achieved this uppercase live op? Well, the truth is, I don't think you ever truly achieve it. You're continually learning, you're continually adapting to your players and continually building new, bigger and fresher things. So I think there's 2 key paths to follow. The first is around data. And I mean this both quantitatively and qualitatively. So in terms of the quantitative approach, again, as I've mentioned, we're running tests. We're always trying to understand what the players are enjoying, what they're not enjoying, what does work, what doesn't. So some questions we may run tests to answer. One could be, what's the value to the player of providing a new set of levels versus the new visuals? So that helps us understand what players are engaging and interacting with most when they play. Do they mind if they're playing the same, if they had to play the same level twice, but the visual of it is different? Or would they prefer the levels were all super different, but the visuals are similar? So that just tells us where to focus our efforts. Another question is, so I mentioned that we have the saga progression. It's good to know, do our players want content that takes them away from the saga, or should we be looking to kind of take our live ops in a different direction, a direction that allows them to interact more with their saga progression? Another one, do players prefer community play? So do they want to play together as teams, or do they prefer competition? And again, this is a super important question because it really helps drive us in, again, deciding where to go next, where to take our calendar next. And again, another one here into reward types. How can we better drive players through our rewards? Or again, what's the best way to surface to the player? So that's the quantitative side. In terms of qualitative, we now have something called Voice of the Player. So this is run by our player insights, and it's every other week. And it's a chance for us to hear what our players are saying. So it's information taken from surveys that we run after our events, from chat in the forum, from complaints to player support, to we have an ideas section in the community where players can put ideas for changes to the game, and then they can vote on ideas that they like. So here we can see things that players want us to get rid of perhaps, or things that they think will make their gameplay experience better. So all of that is put together in the Voice of the Player sessions and then given to us, the game team, so that we can always take these things into account as well. So it's a really important combination. So that's data. The other is tech. So tech's essentially keeping our game alive. the tech team are always looking at the game as it is, as a blueprint, to understand how to be better, how to build better. So what are our current bugbears? What's currently negatively impacting the player experience? What could we add to make the game smoother? So these are questions that they're asking every single day and working on every single day. And it's equally as important, if not more so, than the data, because as I say, it's the tech that keeps the game going. So on that, live ops success, uppercase live ops success, how are we defining success? Well, the first success is player engagement. So we have metrics from our tests. So I may run a test and look at the game rounds. So are players playing more rounds as a result of the content we're giving them? Or I may look at daily active users. So are players returning to the game more as a result? But then also we have the surveys, we have chat in the community, as I mentioned, voice of the player. So that's a really good way to measure if we're being successful. We want the players happy. And success too, yes, it's money, it's the in-app purchases. Are our players being driven to spend in-game? Now we find that if you have success 1, then success 2 will usually follow. So, I mean, on that, ultimately for the lowercase live ops, the uppercase live ops, events, special content, special features, and any other thing that we'll hear live ops referred to as today, at the heart of everything is the player. So they're individuals who continue to return to our game because they like or love the content that we're providing. So as long as we're ensuring that the players are at the center of what drives us, we can't go too far wrong. So thank you very much for your time this morning. This is actually Hunter on the side here. He's another one of our main characters. Any questions?
Cool. We have loads of questions, and basically you've just made the whole of the track redundant because that was so good. You covered out so many areas. Okay, so we have loads and loads of questions. So I'm going to start off with Sai. Sai is saying, what tools do you use for uppercase live ops in terms of A/B testing, analytics, and things like that?
So we actually have an in-house tool that's been built for our tests. So usually we're always running an A/B test. So and it's using the in-house tool. So when we set up an uppercase live op or an event, we tend to have a small segment of players who aren't seeing it, and a segment of players who see maybe. So for example, with Amelia's adventure, the uppercase live op, we had a small segment of players who didn't see it with the narrative, and so then we're able to run the test using this in-house tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in-house tools are great because they let you choose the things you want to do. Obviously, not every team has the chance to build that because, I mean, I've worked for people like Unity in the past, and it's always amazing how many people try to reinvent the wheel. But obviously, as King, it's a lot easier for you guys. You've got your own engine, for goodness sake. So what's the best way to balance data, player insights, marketing, and business? I mean, I think there's a particular side you had which covered this, but I'll let you kind of try to answer that question. So what's the best way to balance all those things?
So this is going to be a really biased response because I'm business performance. So I'm all about quantitative. But as it's the quantitative data that we're using when we're running our A/B tests on the events, we tend to start there and then use the other data, so the qualitative sides, the marketing thoughts, to validate what we're finding. So if my tests say that players want us to, I don't know, delete the saga map, we need the qualitative side to kind of confirm that. So it's more like validation.
And I think for me, it's about using qualitative for framing what questions to ask, and the quantitative to find the kind of significance of those questions. And it's obviously easier when you've got lots of players to be able to sort of work out what statistical significance is in terms of those decisions. And I think it's a bit harder if you're starting a new game because you don't have a scale of audience yet. But I think it's still a case of where you got to use data, what data you can get your hands on.
Definitely, we're very lucky with the number of players that we have playing, because it does mean that we're able to do those tests where only a small segment of players don't get to see the brand new content. So we're not impacting too many, but we're still getting significance.
Yeah, and it's a conversation we had yesterday on the Game Maker Insights side, of that balance between using data effectively, but realizing that data is going to give us our history. It's not going to tell us what will happen. Yeah. And getting that balance between like using that to drive our decision making, but not letting it override our vision for the game, which is kind of what you were saying. So there's a question here from Janus. I'm going to probably butcher the name there. Can live op in capitals become a reoccurring live op with time?
That's actually a really good question. So I think it depends on the nature of I'm really regretting this title now, on the nature of this uppercase live op.
It works. It works.
As the goal essentially is with each uppercase live op, we should be introducing a new mechanic. It depends on the individual situation. So for a narrative one, I guess it could become reoccurring, depends how you look at it. Because we may now do a new narrative with Amelia. So that could be Amelia's story part 2. So I think we'd still call it uppercase, but it would be reoccurring.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I mean, I look at it as I try to work out cadence and schedules for reoccurring events as my primary driver, but then I've got to think about when I've got content releases or feature releases, how I use those. And then you think about the kind of real world and maybe even in-game narrative moments that you want to celebrate. In fact, one thing that kind of informed my thinking on it was the Subway Surfer guys. I did about 2 hours of consultancy, so it's nothing relevant. But it was interesting how they added the idea of traveling to cities and that idea of going to Rome. And then a year later, then they went back to Rome. It unlocked a way of, was that a reoccurring live op or is it an uppercase live op? Because arguably it's an uppercase live op because each incident of the repeat is unique in its own flavor and is being treated as its own value. Does that make sense?
It does. It sounds like I'm going to have to make a whole new criteria for my next talk. Uppercase reoccurring.
I mean, I'm massively into the reoccurring thing because I think it's about making the live operations process efficient.
Yeah.
But you can't make it tedious. Is I think where you're coming from, and I think that's a really valuable thing to talk about. So King are obviously a massive company with considerable resources. This is coming from Anonymous. This Anonymous guy is really kind of asking all the questions. What would be your key advice to smaller indie companies, i.e. what is LiveOps Basic?
What is LiveOps Basic? I think that goes back to that kind of the definition that I pulled out at the start. So, and at the end actually. So it's balancing keeping your players at the heart of everything and just providing new, fresh content. So it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be awesome or amazing. So at no point when I was saying uppercase live ops, so they say it had to be changing the world. It's just about providing something new and fresh. So I guess my advice would be just to talk to your players, even if you've got less of them, maybe that they'll engage more, maybe they'll interact a little bit more.
And the more authentic you are, I think that's I mean, we talk about data being important, and it absolutely is, but I think authenticity goes hand in hand with it. I think if you use your data without authentic connection with the players, it's not going to get the flavor, is it? It's not going to get that experience.
Exactly. That's why our voice of the players is so important, I think, because it really does. You know, we have an ideas section where players put down their ideas for the game. Like, I love that we have that and that we take that into account.
And I love the fact that you used Becky's article as the first thing, because Becky used to work for us when she wrote that article. So she was a graduate who managed to help move on to being a producer. Anyway, so Wouter thanks you for the talk and asks, who gives the final go, no go for an event? Or is that a joint effort within the team, or does it need to go to a product owner, for example?
So when the team, so the 4 of us, CRM, production, design, myself, we put together a brief, and then that is presented to the head of studio with kind of that will cover what we want, what the hypothesis is for the event, why we think it will work, and the expected, the way it will run, the expected, I've lost my words.
What's the word? Yeah.
Impact, expected impact.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I have a slightly different view on it, but that's because we do live ops as a service. And our view is that we've scheduled it. And once it's in the schedule, it's approved by the product owner. Okay. And obviously, because we're working with third parties, it therefore has to have been approved by the client in the process as well. So whoever the developer is. But for us, it's the admin, the community manager, admin, whatever the role is, depends on how we're working with the team. It's their decision on the day because they're the ones who are going to press the button live. So if there's something that's going wrong, they need to be able to roll it back. So our view is that we empower the people who are going to run the actual event on the day to make the final call, but they're backed up by all that management support.
No, that makes sense. As we're the ones who are turning it on the day. So if it goes wrong, we're the ones turning it off and problem solving it. So we're kind of everywhere, But when we're going forward to get this sign off, it's more for brand new things that are going to take a significant chunk of development time.
Yeah.
So if we're using the reoccurring or the uniques, there's less of that kind of solid process, and there's more of a review of the overall calendar for the year.
Yeah, but then it's like any feature sort of scheduling process. I remember when I was at PlayStation Home, I was responsible as home architect. I was responsible for all the platform development, and I had to get all of the regions in Sony to agree with anything. And if anyone knows anything about Sony, you'll know how much of a nightmare that is, particularly with the time zones. But that's why everything had to be done early and then released over time when it became available. You couldn't actually schedule anything until it was actually done. But yeah, anyway, that's my take on it. So we've probably got time for one more question. I've got about 6 left, so I'm trying to work out which one. I suppose I'm going to do it because it's topical. What has been the impact of COVID-19 on live ops for you guys?
Gosh, trying to get me in trouble with this one, aren't we? Thanks for that.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah.
I thought I got out unscathed. So during COVID, players have been inside more. So we found that they are playing our games more and engaging more. So as a result of that, because we're kind of aware that we are getting more players in the game because of COVID, and we've run unlimited lives campaigns twice. So players can just come and play for as long as they like. So we're seeing different player behaviors than we are usually, because we're running these campaigns where we're just giving players extra things just to help them along their way during COVID. I mean, that's a cagey answer, but that's the best that I have.
I mean, it's an interesting space because right now we've seen, obviously a very difficult situation for a lot of people. And what do people do in difficult situations? They seek play, because it's a great distraction. It's good for self-esteem. It's good for self-confidence. It's good for release. And so I think it's understandable. We've seen an uptick in people playing games, particularly mobile games. And what happens next, who knows? As the restrictions change, I still think games will continue to come out of it very positively. And I think particularly big games, which are easy to find, like yourselves, I think will always be one of the sort of better beneficiaries for this particular kind of like model. So yes, I think it's an interesting problem, and it's going to have an impact on ad use. It's going to have an impact on in-app purchase. But what we don't know is when the recession hits, how it will then further affect. But that's not a game-specific issue. That's an industry issue. And our job as game people, I think, is to make that transition, that process as easy as possible, and to fulfill the entertainment needs of our audience.
Yeah, definitely. And as we say, we continue to run tests, so we should see when that step change happens. And then the idea would just be to continue to read our data, hear what our players are saying, and just adjust and adapt as we need to.
Exactly. And I think that's it. That's the only thing we can do is to be as responsible as we can to our audience and the data they show. And on that note, I have to say thank you. That was a fantastic talk. That really was brilliant. And I'm so glad that you did that. I know you were a little nervous earlier, but it did not come across at all. So thanks very much for that.